Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
and welcome to all of you who are here in person at Adith Emanuel on this Friday, September 8th, the Friday during Labor Day week, and all of you who are joining us through the blessing of technology as well. Yes, we observed Labor Day on Monday, which may seem like ages ago for some of us, but we're delighted tonight that we have a guest speaker. Don Dilio will be sharing with us some interesting stories about how 20th century Jewish leaders in the labor movement had an impact on American workers. So we welcome you and we look forward to hearing from you later on. And we also are here with the Love family at the cusp of Ariel being called to the Torah tomorrow. And we're delighted that you can be here. And for all of those of you who are joining us through the blessing of technology, feel free to say Shabbat Shalom in the chat and share with us where it is that you are joining us tonight. We turn now in our Siddur to page 128, and that is in the brackets. Hine ma tov, how good and pleasant it is that we are all here together.
Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad.
As we turn now in our prayer books to pages 120 and page 121 in the brackets, it's my pleasure to call to the Bima the Love family, who will lead us in the lighting and the blessing of our Shabbat candles.
Asher keshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'chalik ner shal Shabbat. Amen.
As we continue now on page 123, we continue with the Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kudsho be'ahava uvratzon hin hilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom tehillah lemikraye kodesh secher litziat mitzrayim kivanu b'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kadshecha ve'ahava uvratzon Inhaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mechadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. L'chaim.
You can take your break. As we turn now in our prayer books to page 138, we welcome in Shabbat with Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nikabelo Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nikabla Shamor v'zachor miribor echad Ishmi'anu elam yuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad L'shem u'tiferet v'litchila Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nikabela Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla Likrat Shabbat Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha Ki mechora beracha Merosh mikadam nasucha Zor ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nikabela Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla Boi v'shalom
We rise and face the entrance to our sanctuary.
Boi v'shalom ateret bala Gam b'simcha uv'sola Tochem u'ne'am segula Boi kala Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nikabela Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla
And while we're standing, we take a moment to turn to somebody, perhaps not to the person next to us, if we already know that person, in front of us, behind us, introduce ourselves to one another as we greet one another. Shabbat Shalom. And so we turn now to page 146. Page 146. We continue with Baruch Hu.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamevorach le'olam va'ed.
On page 149. This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, my sibling, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, my sibling, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. On page 151. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
May be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבביך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לעוד על ידיך, והיו לי תותפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
We continue on page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות עושי פלא, נורא תהילות עושי פלא. מלכות תקרא ובניך
on page 161. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. As we continue on page 164 for tefillah, we rise as we are able.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufia kitehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei
We continue on page 177 as we read together. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki oto hu mecharon lekol hashalom. Ki oto hu mecharon lekol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים
As we continue our prayer silently, perhaps we are led by the words on the pages of our Siddur, of our prayer book, through page 181. Or perhaps we are led by those meditations and thoughts in our hearts. We continue silently. We turn our thoughts and prayers now to those who are in need of healing, and so we turn in our Siddur to page 371 in the brackets in the middle of the page. If you're joining us through the blessing of technology and you're thinking of someone who is in need of healing, feel free to add their name to the chat or comments at this time. In our extended Adith Emmanuel family, we send out blessings of healing to Herb Rosenbluth, Nadav Ameneker, Mindy Fisher, Kayla Khanabat, Adan Leib, Umasalea, Nick Ramsey, Marty Parada, Joyce Asbury, Barbara Savage, Marlene Gratchner, Sophia Gaia Siegel, Flora Hans, Sarah Gardner, Cindy D. Riccio, Harry Greenberg, Freda Shapiro, Judy Fowler, Brian Zabel, Nick Bod, Deb Nielsen, Moshe Ben Elizabeth Theodore, Rosalie Middleman, Jennifer Ness, George Goldstein, Harriet Eisner, Carla Teisch, Linda Drachman, Chaim Ben David, Eileen Davison, Craig Davison, Hugh Morton, Art Bond, Roberta Levine, Jordan Steinberg, Lisa Galda, Ed Crosby, Myra Kaplan, Jeff Schaefer, Marion Gwertz, Louis Alahut, Carol Schaefer, Mary Mednitsky, Jocelyn Jackson, Jen Jones, Michael Infanti, Gary Garnick, Ann Marsden, Rick Ulrich, Ileana Cohn, and others whose names we should add aloud at this time. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei HaCholim. It's my pleasure that tonight we have a guest speaker, that we have Don Zilio with us tonight. Because it's not in isolation that you come and speak and share your words with us. Rather, there is a national labor on the bima, or in the pulpit, or in the mosque, where across the country, last week and this week, whenever it is we observe the Sabbath, we've invited guest speakers to be a part of this awareness and help for a while shine the spotlight of the way that our religions have for years been addressing the kinds of things that Don Dilio has spent a very long time doing. And as he and I were getting to know one another this past week, I shared with him one time I had a labor on the Bima speaker teach me, it was really the Torah that taught the first labor right, Shabbat, right? In the 10 Commandments, 6 days you shall labor, but on the 7th day you shall call it a day of rest. And in the version of the 10 Commandments that we find in Deuteronomy, it is given for this reason. Why do we have Shabbat? Because we knew what it was like when we were slaves, when we toiled for 7 days nonstop. And so this day of rest, which now has grown into a weekend in some circumstances, not necessarily for some of us who continue to be on the Bema for the Sabbath, has really started with the Jewish tradition. Just a few words about Don Dilio. He has been serving the public for his entire career and then some. And he's been a member and a leader, a president and a chair of multiple unions, and specifically the AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. He's been advocating for them, for fairness in the workplace for many, many years, and with other unions. But currently he serves as an instructor of labor and politics in the New Jersey legislative process, labor history and collective bargaining, and steward training at Rutgers University Union Leadership Academy. And he recruits for the program. And he is here to share with us tonight some of these ways that 20th century Jewish labor leaders have had an impact on the American worker, and we welcome you to the Bema. Okay, I'm going to go down so I can watch your face.
So we had the seventh day off in the Bible, right? Okay, so it only took us till 1938 to get the second day off, which is Saturday. So, that's just an example of how tough it is to make progress in the labor movement, at least. But anyway, when the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? The union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn, but yet without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel would turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring together a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. That's the national anthem called Solidarity Forever from organized labor. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later on, but I wanted to talk tonight about some of the more famous labor leaders in America who were Jewish, and the contributions they made, the everlasting contributions so far, anyway. Samuel Gompers, nee Gumpertz, was a British-born American cigar maker, labor union leader, and a key figure in the history of the American Federation of Labor. He served as president from 1886 to 1924. Gompers promoted harmony among the different craft unions that comprised the AFL. Now, why did he have to do that? Well, the unions back then, the craft unions, they were, purists, right? They had a skill, a highly wanted skill, rated skill. And they didn't want anybody else, in the union, right, that had anything lesser than they had in terms of skills. So, because, in their mind, I guess it would, poison the workplace. But, and that was a major problem for the AFL and for organized labor right up till today. Because today, in American unions, you have the building trades, right, which consider the AFL their real home, right? That's where they started out. And then you have the CIO, which was created, in the 1930s by John L. Lewis, Dave Dubinsky, and in the CIO were, semi-skilled workers and unskilled workers, factory workers, anything other than building trades. So till this day, in the labor movement, even though we're together, the AFL-CIO, and we've made a lot of progress, there's, that element of feeling inside the labor movement that, we're the building trades, you're everybody else, right? And we work together when we can work together. And, we'll go our way when we have to go our way. So that was Gomper's, claim to fame, that he promoted that harmony amongst the different craft unions, and he kept it. He promoted through organization and collective bargaining in order to secure shorter hours and higher wages, which he considered the first steps in emancipating labor. So, he wasn't a radical in the sense that let's, burn the building down. Believed in collective bargaining and to gain things, through the process of sitting down and negotiating. And that's the way he thought that we could, have power and establish rules and regulations in the workplace. But I guess I'll tell you about that in a second. He encouraged AFL members, unions to take political action and elect their friends and defeat their enemies. He left that with us till this day. That's what labor truly believes. We will punish our enemies if we have to, and we will elect our friends. Because I'll tell you, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And that's the way it works. So as election day comes up now, you'll see, right, activists, labor union members out on the street knocking on doors of union members' households to make sure they get out to vote. Because electing our friends is, the only way we can survive, to tell you the truth. Let's see. So to this day, organized laborers follow that credo. During World War II, Gompers and the AFL energetically supported the war effort, attempting to avert strikes and boost morale while raising wage rates and expanding membership. So, the government had a wage an hour board back then, and they would intervene if you were on strike. And so Gompers was, a true patriot that way. He wanted to make sure that the labor unions and the AFL delivered the war material that was needed, and built what was needed to win the war. So, although he was against war personally, but at the age of 6, Samuel was sent to the Jewish free school to receive a basic education. At the age of 10, Gompers was sent to work as an apprentice cigar maker to earn enough money for his impoverished family. He continued his studies in night school, learning Hebrew and studying the Talmud, a process he later likened to studying law. In 1863, the Gompers family immigrated to the United States, settling in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. In his free time, he formed a debate club where he became friends with Irish-American Peter J. McGuire, who would later play a larger role in the AFL-CIO, or in the AFL. Now, you might have heard that name, Peter McGuire. He's buried here in Camden County. And every Labor Day, we have a big ceremony at his grave honoring McGuire. At age 14, Gompers joined the Scarmakers Local 15. And that was the English-speaking local back then. Excuse me. Sorry about that. There we go. English-speaking union cigar makers in New York City. The Gompers put his faith in the organized economic movement of trade unionism rather than socialist political movement. Gompers' philosophy of labor unions centered on economic ends for workers, such as higher wages, shorter hours, and safe working conditions, so that they can enjoy an American standard of living. A decent home, decent food, clothing, and money enough to educate their children. To that end, a reporter asked him once, "What does labor want?" And Gompers' reply was, "We want more schoolhouses and less jails, more books and less arsenals, more learning and less vice, more leisure and less greed, more justice and less revenge. In fact, more of the opportunities to cultivate our better natures, to make manhood more noble, womanhood more beautiful, and childhood more happy and bright." And that, is the true goal of organized labor, right? That's what we want. We've wanted that since Gompers said that. And that's not an easy task to achieve, right? If you have to sit down at a table and bargain collectively, there's resistance, right? The middle class, if the only defense against corporate greed is organized labor. And you think about that, right? Corporations are in charge, and they get what they want through the government a lot of times. They're very powerful lobbyists, right? But corporations don't vote, right? Our union members vote. So that's the difference. We're able to stave off, a lot of things that you don't know about that come up, right? We kill it. But, when I started out in the labor movement, we had 33 million members in the AFL-CIO. Today, we have less than 12 million. And where do those jobs go? NAFTA, CAFTA, corporations moving overseas. And it's all about cheap labor. It's really about cheap labor. The cheaper you can get the labor, the more profit they make, right? So, how do we defend that, defend ourselves? We try to organize workers. And that's not an easy task, right? Because employers have the right to a campaign, a right to say no, and then unions have to spend money organizing or trying to organize workers, and it eats up a lot of our resources. And that's a big problem for us. So, again, it's a good fight. It's worth fighting. I always tell people, young guys, girls that come into the labor movement now, I want you to understand something. This is not a job, and this is not a career. This is a cause. If you are not committed to the cause, go work somewhere else. Because you're going to be standing on the shoulders of people who died and were murdered, right, to have workers' rights in this country. The Ludlow Massacre in Montana. The National Guard opened fire on a striking miners' camp at night and killed 12 children and 8 mothers. Right? Now, who authorized the National Guard in Montana to open fire? Woodrow Wilson. Shocking, right? Goes right to the top. But So, we faced all that stuff, from Gomper's time, riots, strike breakers, union thugs, or not union thugs, but, thugs hired by the employer to crack your head open. But, so anyway, Samuel Gompers, it was a real hero in terms of setting the plate for organized labor, and still followed today. Now, Dave Dubinsky, who was called the master of 7th Avenue, he was born in Davnevsky in Brest in Russia, Poland in 1892. His family moved to Lodz. By age 14, Dubinsky was a baker, trained by his father. He joined the Polish Bund, a revolutionary organization of Jewish workers that led to his arrest in 1907, following the abortive 1905 Russian Revolution. After a short time in jail, he returned to Lodz and led a strike of bakery workers. He was arrested 2 more times, and in 1908, he was exiled to Siberia, but escaped along the way and emigrated to the United States in 1911. Dubinsky led the ILGWU union to a powerful position in New York's garment district. He was a very powerful labor leader. He was friends and had access to every president from Franklin Roosevelt right up to Eisenhower. So, he was able to have that kind of power where he could influence, presidents. And what Dubinsky left, though, behind for the labor movement, he demonstrated his ability to combine the more mundane attributes of the labor movement with a broader social vision of a reformer. That's one of the biggest arguments in the labor movement is, are we trade unions and do we stick to organizing workers, negotiating contracts, and being involved in politics? That's it. Or is the labor movement a social movement? Do we have room in the labor movement for a social movement? Of course we do, right? So, we're split all the time about, do we support environmentalists, right? Well, the progressives in the labor movement support the environmentalists. Not the building trades, not the guys that are loggers, right? They want to cut trees. So, there's that kind of split. Dubinsky pushed and believed, as I do, that there's room for a social movement within the labor movement. Matter of fact, we should be a social movement. We should broaden our power and, have a bigger seat at the table. And, we've worked hard. I'll give you examples of when President Obama, who was, a great president, I thought.
You're having trouble hearing.
Oh, really? Okay. You hear me now? Okay. Yeah. President Obama got the endorsement of the AFL-CIO, and we asked him for one thing that we wanted, that we thought would rebuild the middle class in this country. And that was a law called card check, which meant that if 51% of the people in a bargaining unit wanted a union and signed the card, you could have a union. Right now, the way it works is, no matter what percentage you have signed, there's going to be an election, right? The employer's going to put up a fight, will make us spend money, do all that kind of stuff. So what we wanted was, look, if we support you and push you over the top, we want this card check. And we want to be able to organize people easily and rebuild the middle class and make it stronger and go from the 12 million people we have back to the 33 million. And the president said, well, this is what I'll do for you. You get that bill passed in Congress and I'll sign it. Really, that wasn't gonna happen, you know? So that's the kind of stuff that we're up against in organized labor. We are the middle class. We want to rebuild the middle class. We want to expand the middle class, right? We want you to have more leisure time, less stress, lower taxes. But, you know, again, the labor movement is what it is, and we have a lot of enemies, and we got some friends. The last person I want to talk about is a person that I worked for, Jerry Worth, labor's last angry man. He was born in New York City in 1919. He was the son of Jewish immigrants from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. As a young man growing up in Brighton Beach, he developed polio at the age of 4. Growing up, he was inclined towards radicalism by his family's poverty and by the communists that he met. He joined the Young Communist League and subsequently left it for the Young People's Socialist League. He told me one time that he was a driver for Norman Thomas, who of course ran for president on the 6th or 7th times on the Socialist Party. But Worth joined AFSCME, American Federation of State County Municipal Employees, in 1947, when AFSCME was not very powerful. Arnold Zander was the president. In 1952, Zander appointed Worth the president of New York City District Council 37. Worth wrung from Mayor Robert F. Wagner Jr., the son of Robert F. Wagner, an executive order giving the city's workers the right to form unions and providing for elections which could establish those unions as exclusive bargaining agents for the workers in various city agencies. Worth then went on a spree and organized over 30,000 members in a very short time. He gained power within the union for his organizing techniques and his brash style, and he was a rough guy to work for, let me tell you. He fired me one time when I was on an airplane going to Chicago. I didn't even know what for. But when I landed, I found out, and I called him up and I said, not true. He said, come, you're back. Anyway, he organized 30,000. Later on in 1964, he defeated Arnold Zander for presidency of AFSCME. He became the president with 221,000 members nationwide. By 1981, AFSCME had over 980,000 members based on Worth's style of organizing. Today, AFSCME is the largest union in the AFL-CIO. We have 1.4 million members, and we are a political powerhouse across the country because our philosophy is, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. We run people for public office. You know, that's how we get our power from. Now, I'll tell you, there's a program in the New Jersey AFL-CIO has called the Union Leadership Academy. And if you want to run for public office and you're a union member, we take you to Rutgers for 3 days. We show you how to run for public office, how to handle the press, all the intricacies of running a campaign. Once you complete that course, you get the endorsement of the AFL-CIO, the statewide AFL-CIO. Now, what that means is that you will have support on election day from organized labor workers, union workers, knocking on the doors. You'll get money from the AFL-CIO, and you know, hopefully you get elected. Well, we have 1,280 union members across New Jersey elected to public office. If you remember Steve Sweeney down here, was an iron worker. We had, you know, he was one of our members. We had him from the, you know, president of the Senate, all the way down to, you know, commissioners on the fire departments. We have mayors that are union members that we put through these schools. So, you know, we're looking at power in a different way, right? From the top down rather than from the bottom up. So that program continues, and every year we graduate, I don't know, 30, 40 people who run for public office. So we're trying to come back. So yeah, so Jerry Worf was an interesting character. The other two folks I want to tell you about, it's real quick. Randy Weingarten, I don't know if you heard of her name. She's the president, national president, American Federation of Teachers. They got about 1 million members. Very progressive, controversial, strong. And I got a little list of books that you can look at or read. The Master of 7th Avenue by Robert Parmet, the story of Dave Dubinsky. Labor's Last Angry Man by Joseph Golden, the story of Jerry Worf. And Union Made by Norm Finkelstein, the story of Samuel Gompers. And The Great Expectation School by Dan Brown and Randy Weingarten. So I'll leave these up here if anybody's interested in reading any of those books. Just take a sheet. I just want to tell you a little bit about my background. I started out at Princeton University, which is a very difficult place to work if you're not a professor, or you know, it's very low paid, always has been. But they did have a union there. And I ran for president of that union, and I won. And I started negotiating with the university in a way that they weren't used to. You know, it was more, negotiations was always, you know, we would set the table, and then you would come in. But I reset that table for them. But very difficult employer. But anyway, I became president of that local, about 1,000 members. And AFSCME came on campus to organize library workers. So I gave a speech in favor of organizing, you know. The next thing I know, I get a call from AFSCME, you looking for a job? I said, yeah, come see us. I went to see AFSCME. That lasted 32 and a half years. And I worked all over the country in presidential races, governor's races, Senate races. So I was a political action rep, right? And I would go into a state, and I would go to the AFL-CIO, gather up their members, lay out a program, and every Saturday we would go to door knocking in that particular state or city. Did that for years. I also served as the president of the Central Labor Council in Mercer, which had about 50,000 members. I had that job for 12, 14 years. And there was an organization called the Vietnam Veterans United trying to raise money to build a memorial to Vietnam veterans that were killed from Mercer County in the Vietnam War. So they called me up, and I said, what's the deal? They said, look, we were having fundraisers, golf outings and that kind of stuff, and he said, we're trying to raise money to build a monument. Okay. How much you trying to raise? He said, well, if you could pitch in and maybe raise $5,000 for us, that would be wonderful. I said, okay, I'll send out a letter. I send out a letter. Listen, we're trying to build the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Anything that you can give, will be appreciated. Now, this went to the local unions that were under my umbrella, right? About 6 days go by, and I get mail. I open up an envelope from the United Auto Workers. It was a check for $5,000. So I called him up. I said, listen, we're trying to just spread this around. He said, we had a membership meeting that was passed, and we have a lot of Vietnam veterans in our local. You got the $5,000. Great. Next 2 weeks, I raised $55,000 for the monument, and they built it. It's beautiful. It's an individual headstone for each person killed from Mercer County. There were 66 of them, plus a monument in the center with all their names on it. So, we're able to do things. That was the social part, you know, right, of reaching out. But anyway, after that, I started, you know, on this, wasn't a paid job, but I started teaching at Rutgers, different courses, history of labor, labor and politics, collective bargaining, all that kind of stuff. But in the middle of all that, I get a call from my international president. He said to me, "How would you like to go to Harvard University?" I said, "Yeah, okay." Sent me to Harvard and studied there. And, you know, it was no small thing in my life, I'll tell you that. But it was a great experience. And I roomed with, I don't know if you heard of Richard Trumka. He's the national president of the AFL-CIO, who passed away recently. He was a roommate. I got to know a lot of, you know, the international presidents. And so, you know, my career, I don't even want to call it that, my cause has been wonderful in that respect. I didn't make a lot of money, but I worked hard, and I got a lot of pleasure, and I made some of the greatest people in the world, I made some of the greatest friends. So that's why I say, solidarity can't be beat. Union, yes. Any questions? Yeah? Oh, yeah. Listen. Yeah. Well, actually, I couldn't hear it, but I heard a little bit. It's about labor in schools.
The question was about students today who are being encouraged to go into trade work instead of, it's not worth the college education. Are you doing any work going into the high schools and would you say, and advocating or recruiting
Oh,
or
yeah.
anything like that?
Yeah. Actually, I did that, I started doing that years ago. And it's interesting. I went into Roebling, New Jersey, right, down the road. And their grandparents all worked in Roebling Steel, right? So they come from union families, blue-collar families. And when I went there and gave my message, I got a very warm reception, and they asked really great questions, and they knew the answers. The next week, I went to a suburban school, right? You know, all professionals, upper middle class students, and made my pitch for labor. And they said, "You know what? My father's a dentist. Why should he pay a union wage?" You know? So his assistant could live in the middle class, for one thing, you know? But, so there's a difference, right? There was a difference in that. And you can see it right away. But getting back to the trades, I don't care, you know, how many people go to college. You're gonna need a toilet, and you're gonna need a sink, right? You're gonna need some kind of electricity. And I gotta say, the building trades are highly skilled. You go through an apprentice program, it's 4 years. They learn their trade, and you know what? Your personal reputation as a tradesman is always on the line. I mean, if you do a good job, right, somebody will say, "He's good." You want a good plumber, get him. And that's, you know, we're gonna have to have tradespeople, but need them.
Other questions? We'll take one more.
Do some of the unions operate trade schools for the post-high school students that want to become either an electrician or a plumber?
Yeah.
So on?
Yeah. Well, you know, I went to Trenton High, and when I went there, they had, you know, we called it shops, right? There was auto shop, electrical shop, printing shop, automotive. So they were teaching, you know, high school kids 4 or 5
Were they taught by the unions, or were they,
They were
No,
taught-
you-
they-
okay.
They had
did-
teachers and union people come in.
so, okay, some of the teachers may have been part of a union,
Yeah,
but, okay.
sure.
Right, you took shop, right,
Yeah.
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 With advocating for people being part of the trades, that would be another way to increase membership.
You know, the other thing I do in respect to this is I go to apprentice programs at the union halls at night and try to teach them about, you know, this is a social movement also, right? It's not building trades, you do your job and you're not connected to the community, you know, other than, you know, recreationally, right? But you have responsibility and we need your help if you want to maintain middle class, you got elected friends, you know, so we try to educate them that way too.
Well, thank you. If there
Yeah.
are further questions, you can find Don Dilio in our Oneg Shabbat, and we thank you for sharing. I
Yeah.
learned a lot tonight, and also see your passion about what you've been doing
Yeah.
for a lifetime. So
Just,
thank you very much.
Thank you. I ran for the Senate in 1994, right? And one of my stops was in Monroe, which is a Jewish community. And
I'm gonna take this piece of paper.
so it was a coffee klatch. And I go in, you know, and nobody knows me. And lady said to me, what's your name? I said, Don. Are you a Democrat? I said, yeah. Mildred, put the coffee on. They didn't want to ask me, they go, you're endorsed. They were, you know, they were Roosevelt Democrats from way back. But hey, thanks a lot. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
And we're going to continue now in our service.
Oops. Yeah, thanks.
We'll continue now in our service on page 586, 586 at the bottom of the page. As we are able, we rise for Alinu. We turn our thoughts and prayers now to those who are no longer with us, and so we turn in our Siddur to pages 598 and 599 as we think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us during this period of Shiva and Shloshim. We remember Gilbert Zuckerman, father of Alan Zuckerman and Paula, as well as those who died at the season in years past, whose yahrzeits we mark on the Shabbat. We think of Max Cohen, Moshe Gamlieli, Murray Goldberg, Irv Horwitz, Bobby Israel, Louis Korth, Esther Paul, Barbara Pernaton. And if you're joining us through the blessing of technology, feel free to add the names of your loved ones in the chat at this time. And if there are other names of loved ones whom you want to mention at this time, I would invite you to stand. As my hand passes through the congregation, you can mention their names at this time. And so I would invite those who are in the period of Shiva or Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning, to rise at this time. For those who are in the first year of mourning, to rise at this time. As well as those who are observing a yahrzeit on this Shabbat, to rise at this time. We think of them and all those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. Zichronam levracha. May their memories be for blessing as we all rise now as one congregation in comfort and support, continuing with the words of Mourner's Kaddish. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'olam omei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, Amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom miromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn, and comfort to all who are bereaved, and let us say, amen. May be seated. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Bima our synagogue president, Doug Richter, as he will share with us a few hodaot, some announcements.
Particular microphone.
Here's one. Speak right.
Can everybody hear me?
Just speak
No.
right into it. Like, go, you can use these.
Hello, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Start by thanking Rabbi and Sandy and her for showing up here for the service tonight, and our leaders, Aaron and Stacy, and also Mr. Dilio for his presentation tonight, and mazel tov to the Lowe family, the Bat Mitzvah of Ariel, which will be tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, shortly after the Torah Talk and Bagels, which is at 8:45. Tomorrow night, we have the Slichot program, followed by services. That's a program about forgiveness. That is a new thing we're trying this year, so I encourage people to try to make it to that. And Sunday morning is the first day of religious school, and we are also having a committee fair that day. So if anyone is interested in finding out what our different committees are and what they do, please stop by, and you can join as many committees as you like. What else? Oh, as high holidays are approaching, we need to think about the high holiday food drive that's being run by AFTI and Social Action Committee, and also the Men's Club prepared meals for Rosh Hashanah dinners and break the fast on Yom Kippur. So keep an eye on the weekly emails and the website, and details about those things will be repeated often. And that's it. Shabbat shalom.
We turn in our Siddur to page 645. 645 for our closing song, which is Lo alecha, in the spirit of the words of our speaker tonight, it's not upon us to complete the work, but neither are we free to desist from it.
לא עליך המלאכה לגמור, לא עליך לגמור, לא עליך המלאכה לגמור, לא עליך לגמור, ולא אתה בן חורי להתבטל ממנה, ולא אתה בן חורי ולא אתה בן חורי להיבטל ממנה, ולא אתה בן חורי.
Please join me in the Motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon, and Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
But we have a new row of batteries here. We have a new row of batteries here.
Excellent. Let's see if we can save this